There's a specific kind of man, and if you don't learn to spot him before you fall in love, he will take your life apart one piece at a time, and he will make it look like it's your fault the entire way through. Now, I'm not talking about a bad date. I'm not talking about someone who forgets your birthday or leaves the toilet seat up or does not text back fast enough. I'm talking about specific traits. Patterns doctors and researchers have studied for years. Traits that, quietly wreck relationships from the inside while looking completely normal from the outside. In this video, I'm going to give you 4 traits that you need to look out for. And before anyone gets defensive, let me be clear. These traits, they're not exclusive to men. Women carry them too. This is not about hating on anyone. This is about protecting yourself and giving you the language to see what is actually happening before, you're 10 years deep and wondering how you got here. It's important that you understand that patterns do not show up on a first date wearing a name tag, right? They don't. They show up disguised as charm, as intensity, as devotion. A woman who has never learned to spot them, well, she will call the early stages exciting. When a trained eye will call them a warning. And that's really the whole point of this video. Not to make you, suspicious of every man that you meet, but to give you a framework. So you stop confusing intensity with intimacy and stop confusing a good storyteller, well, with a good partner. Now, some of you are going to recognize someone from your past in the next few minutes. Some of you might recognize someone currently sitting on your couch right now, watching this with you. And that is exactly why this conversation matters. So let's break this down, trait by trait, with real research behind it, not just my opinion. So make sure you watch this whole video because by the end, you're gonna know exactly the 4 traits to watch for before you ever hand someone your heart, your time, or your future. Now, before we get into it, quick disclaimer. I'm not a licensed therapist or psychologist. What I share, on this platform comes from what I've seen, what I've lived, what I've researched, and what I've learned from people who faced adversity in relationships or life and trusted me with their stories. Always seek professional help if you feel, you need it. Also, I post reels and stories on Instagram, fairly often. I'm talking about, the raw, unscripted stuff that doesn't always show up here on YouTube. If you want that side of things, the link is down in the description and on the pinned comments below. All right, back to the 4 traits because the first one fools more people than any other trait in this entire list, including some of the smartest, most self-aware women that I know. Trait number 1, the covert narcissist. When most people, hear the word narcissist, they picture someone loud, arrogant, obsessed with probably mirrors. That is not this guy. This one's quiet, humble sounding. He talks, about how misunderstood he is, how hard his childhood was, how, no one ever gives him credit for how much he does. Researchers who study this pattern call it covert narcissism. And it's not even a separate, diagnosis. It is a quieter presentation of the exact same disorder, one that hides, behind humility instead of, grandiosity, which is exactly what makes it so much harder to spot in the first 90 days. And here's the crazy part. Studies on patterns of covert narcissists show that they report more emotional stress in partners of people managing several actual mood disorders, which tells you that, this is not a small thing to shrug off as him being, sensitive. He would not slam doors. He'll just go silent for 2 days after you get a promotion that he did not get. And when you ask what is wrong, he'll say nothing in the specific tone that means everything. You see, real humility, it does not, fish for reassurance every single day. Real humility does not need an audience. He will, compliment you in public and then find a small way to deflate you the moment that you get home. It's important that you understand that the loud narcissist breaks the door down, and the quiet one just makes you think you locked yourself out. Trait number 2, untreated borderline traits. Now, I want to be careful here because plenty of people with this diagnosis get real help and build generally healthy relationships. Now, this is specifically about the pattern left untreated. Clinicians call it, splitting, when someone swings between idolizing you completely, you are perfect, you are the love of his life, the one that has been, waiting his whole entire life, and devaluing you completely. You're also the worst thing that's ever happened to him, sometimes, within the same week, sometimes within the same argument. Research have found that this pattern is often driven by an intense fear of abandonment. One so strong, it, paradoxically pushes away the very person he is terrified of losing. Almost like, someone gripping water so tightly that it just runs out between their fingers. It feels intoxicating at first. Love bombing, constant texting, moving in together after 6 weeks because it just feels right. Then one small disagreement, a canceled plan, a slow reply, and suddenly you are the villain in a story that you did not know you were auditioning for. You will find yourself apologizing for things that made no sense to apologize for just to get back to the version of him that you met, 2 or 3 weeks ago? The tell here is speed. Healthy love, it builds over months. This kind of intensity tries to build a whole future in 6 weeks before either of you actually know who the other person really is, right? Love, it should feel steady. It should not feel like a Lambo going 150 with no seatbelt on. Trait number 3, chronic victim mentality. And this one hides behind something that looks like sympathy, right? Researchers, they have actually given this a name now. The tendency for interpersonal victimhood. And it breaks down to 4 parts. A constant need for recognition of his own suffering, a quiet sense that his pain makes him morally better than everyone around him, very little empathy left over for anyone else's problems, and a habit of replaying old grievances on a loop for years, sometimes decades. Studies have linked this pattern closely to vulnerable narcissism, meaning the suffering is not always fake, but it becomes the entire identity, and the identity requires an audience. Every ex was crazy. Every boss was out to get him. Nothing's ever his fault. And slowly, you start performing unpaid therapy sessions for a man who has never once asked you how your day was. You would notice it in small moments first. The way he tells a story about his ex, and somehow, he is the hero and she is the villain. Every single time, in every single story. Ask yourself one simple question when you meet a man like this. In every story he tells you about his past, is he ever the one who was wrong? If the answer is never, that is not bad luck repeating itself. That is a pattern. A man who is never wrong will eventually decide that you are always the problem because somebody has to be. And guess what? It's never going to be him. Trait number 4, and this might honestly be the most dangerous one on the list because, it constantly gets mistaken for love. Pathological jealousy. Clinicians split this into 2 types. Obsessional jealousy, which looks like constant intrusive suspicion that he cannot turn off, even if he wants to. And delusional jealousy, sometimes called Othello syndrome, where the belief that you are cheating, it becomes fixed and completely, resistant to evidence, no matter how much proof you hand him. You can show him the truth, it will still not matter. I want you to be aware that jealousy is the most common motives behind intimate partner violence, and in the most extreme documented cases, even homicide. Now, this is not me being dramatic for views. This is documented repeatedly by people who study this for a living in peer-reviewed research, not just, internet forums. Giving themselves your location without asking first, it's not love. Going through your phone secretly, it's not love. Interrogating your friends, to question your whereabouts, it's not love. It's my belief that real love trusts you, right? Control just disguises itself as concern, and it's usually loudest right before it turns dangerous. There is a verse in 1 Corinthians that says, love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, and it keeps no records of wrong. Now hear that last part again. It keeps no records of wrong. Everything that we just talked about, the manufactured victimhood, the jealousy, the splitting, the quiet resentment, it all runs on keeping score, right? And needing someone to lose so someone else could win. But real love, it does not run on a scoreboard. It does not need a winner, right? If a man is constantly keeping tabs on what you owe him emotionally, that is not devotion. So let's wrap this video up. The most dangerous man is rarely the one who looks dangerous. He's the one who feels the most intoxicating in the beginning. You're not overreacting for noticing these patterns, and you're not crazy for trusting your gut when something feels off before you can even explain why. Trust that instinct because it's not paranoia. It's a pattern recognition that your mind picked up before your heart caught on, built from things that you noticed and talked yourself out of noticing. So if you got any value out of this video, please send it to a woman in your life who needs to hear it before her next relationship, not after. You all deserve a love that adds to your life, not the one that, quietly takes it apart. Watch for the patterns, trust what your gut already noticed, and do not let anyone convince you that, noticing red flags early, makes you the difficult one in the relationship.